My name is Dacia Clay. I'm the audio librarian here at Classical 91.7. While I'm a real librarian, I have a deep, dark secret. I know very little about classical music. I grew up listening to rock, and I know something about jazz. But when it comes to classical, but I really want to learn. So, every week on this show, a classical music expert will give me a piece of classical music they think I should know, and then we'll discuss it. Come learn with me in the classical classroom. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Classical Classroom. I'm Dacia Clay, and here with me today is Ms. Zoe Miller, who is our brand new MusicLab intern here at Classical 91.7. She studies violin at Rice University's Shepherd School of Music, and as it turns out, she was also a distinguished young woman. Is it Distinguished Young Woman of Connecticut? Is that correct? I've got it right? Okay. Which was formerly America's Junior Miss.
Yes.
And you said that you were like in the top talent.
I got to go to national finals down in Alabama, turns out.
Weird.
For that competition representing Connecticut, my home state.
Nice.
But yeah, and then I ended up doing pretty well on it, so
awesome.
It was a pretty good experience. It was fun.
Did you win like tons of cash and
they give you scholarship money.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's really nice.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's meant for senior girls in high school.
Yeah.
So going on to higher education. So
did you have like the sash across and everything?
I was actually a little annoyed about that because
why no sash?
I know. They actually gave you like medallions.
Oh, okay.
Because it's based a lot on academics and scholarships, so they wanted to kind of veer away from the Miss America route. But I know my mom was pretty annoyed when the only pageant type activity I did didn't give me a sash or a crown for it.
That's really funny. Awesome. Okay. Zoe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, but of course, I'm really excited to get to talk to you today. What are you going to be teaching me about?
Well, I'm going to talk about performance practice in regards to when an audience thinks they should applaud or not during the performance. Yeah. So that's kind of a point of contention, I see.
Yeah, no, I am so glad that you want to talk about this because I am a total bumpkin and I would totally be that person. I am that person at a classical music show that's just like, that was amazing!
Yeah.
And nobody else is clapping.
You know, I have many friends and family members who aren't musicians or haven't had past musical experience per se. And, you know, they want to come support me at my symphony concerts. And always afterwards, they're like, but why didn't we clap after every piece ended? And it's, you know, it's a common misunderstanding.
Yeah. So okay. So teach me, why are there these long pauses? What's up with this?
Well, so I guess the most common instance you'd run into this problem would be if you're going to like a symphony concert, because, you know, you have these major symphonies.
Yeah.
And they're always broken into different movements, which are these pretty much like self-contained pieces within the full symphony itself.
Okay.
So most often, like, you'll have 4 movements. And, you know, when you look in your program, you have Haydn or Mozart or Beethoven symphonies, and they kind of follow a general structure. Like your first movement will usually be this kind of up-tempo movement, and it's in what, you know, we call sonata form, which will usually mean, you know, the big theme you hear at the beginning of the piece, it's going to come back at the end of that movement.
Okay.
So the first movement, maybe kind of a clue, is that whatever it starts with, it's probably going to end with it as well.
Huh.
And so when that's over, you know, you kind of feel like you were back where you started from.
Yeah.
But then it's going to go on to a second movement because it's a much longer piece than only, you know, that 9-minute segment you heard.
Yeah.
After you have your first movement, you go to a second movement, which is usually a very slow movement. And then the third movement typically is this kind of fast dance-like piece.
Uh-huh.
And then your fourth movement will kind of be this big, like, empowered and big bombastic finish to the piece.
Triumphant ending.
Yeah, usually.
Okay.
More often than not. However, you know, obviously there are always rule breakers as far as that goes. Like, actually, this would be a good example. Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 6.
Is that Pathetique?
Yes.
Yes!
Woo!
I knew something.
It's a wonderful piece. It's one of my favorites. And the third movement, many audience members, when you get to the end of the third movement, you think the piece is over. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm so proud of myself for knowing that Tchaikovsky symphony.
I know.
That happens like once in a blue moon that I actually know something.
The Pathetic?
Yeah. The Pathetic. That one. Because this is like triumphant sounding.
Yeah.
So you're thinking, oh, a piece is about to be over. Finally, I can take a bathroom break. Yeah. Oh yeah, that sounds done.
Yeah. So everyone, you know,
Yay!
that's when you start. But then little do you know, boom, where'd that come from?
What? There it is.
I think this is like such a dilemma for conductors nowadays, because I recently performed this in an orchestra in New York, and the conductor was saying like, we have to finish the third movement quick, everyone has to do a page turn immediately because we're gonna start this fourth movement before anyone can clap. Like, it was his sole mission to just move onwards.
Yeah, well, like a lot of conductors get really annoyed by that.
But yeah, no, some people can get very heated about the whole clapping debate, or, you know, if people will clap in between movements of a piece, and which is kind of crazy because in the classical era, it was totally seen as common for people to clap in between movements.
Read that, yeah.
Yeah, it was actually like encouraged because they're showing their approval of something. So if they heard a movement of a piece that they liked it finish, they'd clap, they'd applaud, and sometimes, you know, they'd have them play the movement over again. Like they do an encore right there, so they'd hear it again twice.
Right.
Which, you know, right now is seen as such a faux pas, I guess. And sometimes they'd even clap in the middle of the movement, kind of like a jazz musician, jazz group performing, you know, someone is like a solo. If you hear a violinist perform a cadenza, people would clap after that, you know.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's necessarily the end of the movement, they'd kind of want to know, you know, show their praise for what the soloist did.
Yeah, like I have this live album of Dave Brubeck, and like, yeah, every time a soloist, like a drummer has a solo or whatever, the audience goes wild, you know, and it's like everybody gets really involved.
Say you're going to go to an opera. That, the whole idea of applause and clapping is a lot different.
Yeah.
You know, I guess maybe it's a little more soloist driven. So say, you know, someone busts out this really great aria and it's just amazing. People will often clap after it because that's kind of focused on this one person. It's like, you know, a highlight of the whole piece.
Yeah.
So operas are a little bit different as opposed to the whole symphony concert etiquette thing where, you know, there will be some clapping in between.
That's really strange.
Yeah.
Also, you know, I've seen musicians applaud.
Yeah.
Like people sitting on the... Okay, so why is it okay for them?
I know. It's a double standard.
Yeah, what's up, musicians?
Yeah, I know, really. When the musicians, they like to show praise for the people who had solos in the orchestra during the whole thing. So they'll often, you know, shuffle their shoes or stomp their heels, or they also, if you're in the string section, will kind of wave their bow around a bit and kind of sometimes lightly tap it against the stand, ever so lightly. And that's, you know, to show appreciation for the people in the orchestra who did have these very big solos. And, you know, and usually at the end, if, you know, everyone's on their feet and clapping, then, like, the conductor will point out, you know, like, here's to that French horn who, like, killed it back in the first movement. Here's to that guy. And so, like, a few people, like, stand up if they had these really big and difficult parts where, you know, there's a lot of stress on them, but they, you know, knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. Though that's good. I'm glad to hear that, like, musicians are getting some sort of, you know, recognition during a performance for, like, doing a good job. Because I know that's got to keep you going as a performer.
Yeah, it's,
you know, that the crowd is, like, cheering you on and, like, behind you. So it's good that there's some sort of support going on.
Camaraderie.
Yeah, yeah. So people applaud at other kinds of concerts. People actually in the orchestra are doing things to recognize their peers who are doing a good job. And it used to be okay for people to applaud at concerts. And now here we are, and the audience feels uncomfortable now at a concert to applaud when they're happy. Like, it kind of doesn't jive. I don't get it.
It's a little strange. Yeah, you can, especially in symphony concerts, you can tell that sometimes the audience is a little tense and sometimes uncomfortable with that whole situation because they're not too sure when they're allowed to or when it's socially acceptable to applaud.
Right.
So that causes some confusion and a little sense of being uncomfortable with them.
So what happened?
One of the earlier incidents they said that may have started this change was right before like the 20th century when Wagner was premiering the opera Parsifal over in Beirut. And so it's 3-act opera, all going as planned. You know, the audience loves it, and they're showing that their appreciation for it by, you know, clapping and hooting and hollering and whatnot. And I guess Wagner was a little angered by that because maybe he wanted it to be more of a existential experience for these people, and he didn't want it always to be interrupted. So at the end of the second act, he came to like the stage and, you know, said, "We love the praise, but we all agreed to go on, you know, no more curtain calls, and we'd prefer if you guys kept quiet." And so this freaked the audience out because they were not used to this. So then when it finally got to the end of the opera, they didn't know what to do.
What?
They didn't applaud because they were told not to.
Oh my God.
So then Wagner was like, "Oh my gosh, what have I done?" And then he came back out, he's like, "Now would be a great time." But all the performers went off stage, they were all changing, and like they couldn't go out to welcome the applause now.
Oh my
So it
God.
was this whole awkward experience, and he felt terrible about it, actually. But then after that, whenever people saw the opera, they were very hushed about it and would, you know, hiss at people who started clapping because they thought this was now like the way to go about watching it.
So basically, Wagner applause shamed people,
Kind of, yeah.
and this is what started this
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
Way to go, Wagner.
And,
Well done.
you know, I think he felt actually quite bad about it after the fact because he thought, you know, it was like the premiere night, like let's go through, like no stops, but then they took it and ran with it.
Wow.
And then it became kind of a concert etiquette thing over in Germany and kind of with the opera scene pretty much. But then they're saying that the conductor, Leopold Stokowski,
Leopold.
over in America, he then kind of became the ambassador of the applause shaming over here with the symphony because he just hated when people were applaud in between movements. He didn't even want people to applaud at all when they came to concerts because he thought it was this divine experience, and he wanted people to just kind of soak it in and not to disrupt, I guess, what was kind of being created there.
It's an interesting thing because I can understand from like an artist's point of view that you want somebody to experience the whole thing, to sort of soak it in, to have a modicum of like respect rather than cheering like crazy people, you know, like I can understand that. But then on the other hand, as you're saying, there are 4 sort of expected movements in a symphony.
Yeah.
And if you're a classical music novice like myself, when I go to a show, it's usually like a rock or jazz show or something, and it's all about audience participation and like getting into it and dancing and clapping and like that would be just sort of the normal thing to do for me. And I don't know classical music that well. And so I feel a little bit like I don't belong there. Like I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to participate in this event. And so it's a little alienating to people like me to know that there are these rules, these sort of unspoken rules that everybody around me knows, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I might stay away from that show.
You know, I think many people feel that way.
Yeah.
Which is kind of wasn't how it started out. It was, they do want audience participation. And many soloists, like Emmanuel Ax, I saw that he didn't understand why people didn't applaud in between movements. He said that, and many other musicians say, it doesn't really disrupt them at all. Like, it doesn't break their concentration, but they just kind of don't understand why. Now that's become the common practice with audience members. Sometimes pieces actually end very solemnly and very softly, and the audience is kind of like, what should we do? Like, the end of the Brahms 3 Symphony. Yeah. It's, you know, big piece, and you've been through so much, and so sometimes you think, we're going to go out with a bang, but this piece actually just kind of, like, dies down and ends very modestly. And so it just kind of dies quietly away. Yeah. But it keeps going on, keeps dying. He milks it.
You think it's over?
And so
it's really over.
Yeah, so now it's really over. And so when you're at a symphony concert, usually you'll see the conductor. He still has his hands up, but very, very slowly will begin to move them down. So I guess if you're maybe a first timer going to the symphony or wondering like, oh my gosh, like when can I finally just applaud this thing? Right. When the conductor finally puts the arms down, it could take a while because they'll really milk it and make sure they get, you know, the resonance of the hall to finally just let go of that chord. Yeah. But then once they're down, and all the orchestra musicians, you know, put their instruments down, you know, it's gone. The piece is done.
Then you can finally applaud. Wow. Well, what is okay? So there's a reason. I think we kind of talked about this beforehand. Like there's a sort of function that movements kind of provide musically. Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about that? Like is it just to kind of give the music some variation, to let people know what to expect? Or like what is it?
I mean, they all are different and they all usually have their own thematic material. Yeah. So as you go through the piece, you're kind of taken almost like on this like journey. Okay. You kind of go to different places, different musical places, different emotional places, who knows, depending on the mood you're in. Because they all have sometimes different like polarizing features and they're different from the last one.
I see.
So that when you finally get to the end of the piece, it feels like you've really worked to get there because it wasn't just handed to you. Like the theme you got at the beginning probably wasn't the one you got at the end. You had to kind of like journey over there to get to the end of it. You had to go through all these different movements, all this different thematic material, and finally you're at this conclusion, and it feels like you've worked and journeyed hard to finally get there for some, I guess, sort of enlightenment. Who knows?
Yeah, well, it reminds me of the structure of drama. It follows a very sort of distinct pattern where you've got the climax, you've got the denouement, you've got like all of that kind of stuff, and you've got your conclusion where everything is sort of solved, and then you, as a person who's viewing this, you know, you have this sense of like what you're talking about, like having been on a journey and you reach conclusion, everything has come full circle and something has transpired. Yeah. You've been transformed. Yes. In some way.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I guess I can't understand when many conductors do want this kind of aura. Excuse me. They want this aura after the piece where it just kind of settles. Right. Because they want you to stay in that element. Yeah. Because you've put in significant time. You've been emotionally entranced by it. And they almost don't want this amazing divine mood you're in to be kind of ruined by, I guess, a rushed applause.
They don't want to pop the bubble.
Yes, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, and I can definitely understand that, but then again, who is this person to dictate what emotions one should be feeling at the end of a piece? And maybe what people are feeling is like a need to have like some sort of release through applause.
No, I definitely agree with you. And I guess, if you do go to a concert and you feel that way, know that you have a feeling, you have a strong feeling. And so you should just act upon it, honestly, because most of the people who will be there hushing you just think that they're, classy and know better. But at the end of the day, if it moves you in a certain way, that leaves the musicians happy, that leaves the conductor happy. They want you to benefit and to, I guess, grow from this experience. And if that moves you to jump on your feet and clap and do the worm, so be it.
That is definitely what I'm doing at the next concert performance I go to.
I would if I could.
Yeah.
Can't.
I could at least do some popping and lock-in.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting debate, I think.
Yeah. And it's one that many classical musicians still have.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like it's very much alive, this conversation. Like I've seen things like what we were talking about in the news very recently.
I guess especially in my generation.
Yeah.
Because I guess the classical music world we were brought in, no one ever clapped. So it's kind of normal for us not to.
Yeah.
Some people think that that's definitely like the proper etiquette. But when you look back at the history of it, you do want the concert experience to be a communal experience. Because if I just wanted to hear, a symphony perfectly played start to finish, I'd just go buy it on iTunes. I wouldn't feel the need to go out to a symphony concert.
Right.
But it's this larger experience you share with the other audience members, the musicians on stage. It's kind of then and in the moment. Every concert's different, and everyone that's in the concert hall plays a part of that, and that's the audience members as well.
Really, what it kind of boils down to is almost a personal space issue. I think as human beings, this is a problem that we have a lot, is that we want to be together because there's something powerful in that being together and experiencing together.
Yeah.
But then when we get there, we bug the crap out of each other, where it's like, oh, this person is like moving their leg and this person is clapping when they're not supposed to. And, I would like to sit here and enjoy this moment at the end of this piece in silence and be able to soak it in. And this idiot over here is breakdancing and clapping. And
well, I started that. I convinced you to.
Zoe made me do it.
I'm the one to blame.
That's kind of what this whole debate sort of comes down to.
Yeah. But I feel like because it's still going on, there's clearly not one right answer. We haven't solved it yet.
Yeah.
But I think the way people will attend concerts and how I guess people will treat that whole audience participation, I believe, is changing. I think a lot of young musicians nowadays do a lot of these informal concerts where, they don't really care if you clap or not, or you talk to your neighbor or not. So I think maybe eventually that might change, as in it's a little more like a free format kind of experience, and that, you can express yourself even though you're in the audience.
Maybe we'll go back to how it was in the
Maybe.
beginning. It's funny because we're kind of coming back around to the sorts of spaces that people used to play in. Like, chamber music.
Yeah.
Like, music that's played in a symphony hall grew out of chamber music that was played in small private spaces.
Yeah, like these salons or...
Yeah, and now, like, classical music, because there's this real sort of awareness in the classical music community that classical music is only going to survive if you bring it outside of the concert hall
Yes.
and bring it to new audiences who might not want to come to concert halls. And so what they're doing is they're bringing this music to smaller spaces, like
Yeah.
bars and museum, like gallery spaces and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, a lot of college-age musicians now, like people I know, will do that. And I think when that becomes popular, which it already is getting there, some formalities will be lifted.
yeah. Well, Zoe, thank you so much for being on the show today. This has been a really cool discussion. I learned a lot, actually.
I hope so.
Yeah, no, it was awesome.
No
Thanks.
promises.
No problem.
Thank you for having me, though. It was a lot of fun.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. You'll have to come back for sure. All right, that about does it for this episode of Classical Classroom. You may now applaud. For more Classical Classroom, go to houstonpublicmedia.org/classroom. You can also listen to us on iTunes. You can go to SoundCloud, where we have an exhaustive list of everything we've ever recorded in the history of ever. You can listen to us on Stitcher Radio. Wherever you listen or subscribe, make sure you like, rate, review us, and make sure it's all positive, or else we'll know it's you. Thanks to our audio producer, Todd Tiberius Hulslander, for making us sound lovely, to our program director, St. John Flynn, for his steadfast leadership, to Zoe Miller for being here today. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you.
To me for saying words, but of course, most of all to you, listeners, for listening. We'll catch you next time.